How about you, Professor?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
Very well.
Yes.
So,
Kabar baik.
kabar baik.
Well, the book is about leadership in the age of globalization.
Right.
So it's how to be a global leader, whether at the international level or the local level. And because globalization generates tremendous opportunities, but also tremendous threats. And so you have to learn how to exercise leadership, to mobilize people to take advantage of those opportunities or deal with the potential dangers. And in the absence of that kind of leadership, there are too many fractures and divisions in communities and in the larger world. So a new kind of leadership is needed to help people transcend these boundaries, build relationships and connections, and to mobilize diverse groups to tackle these complex, interdependent problems. So the new book is called Leadership for a Fractured World, with the subtitle being How to Cross Boundaries, Build Bridges, and Lead Change. I think leaders are made. Every now and then you meet some extraordinary people with some amazing talent, and they may do some great things in the world. And to what degree they're born that way, or to what degree they're a product of their circumstances, I don't know. But I don't think it's helpful to be preoccupied with the notion of great men, because there are few great men or great women in the world. We need models of leadership, or ways to build leadership capacity for ordinary people. In the past, we talked about these great individuals, but today it doesn't make sense. The problems are too complex. We need the manifestation of leadership at all levels of society, in all our institutions, from the family to government to international organizations. And I distinguish between leadership and positional authority. A lot of people have positional authority, but they don't actually provide much leadership. And so you can actually exercise leadership without having a lot of formal power, of being the front presenter of leadership. There's a lot of quiet leadership that goes on in the world that actually makes a difference in helping us to deal with the complexity of the problems and challenges that we face. So by virtue of teaching leadership a long time now, I know that people can be developed in leadership. And there's no set of characteristics or traits that all leaders have. You can meet very charismatic individuals, but you can also meet people that may be a little bit boring from a personality perspective, but they do some wonderful things. So the trait theory of leadership is really gone, and it's not helpful to think of it like that. Obviously, issues like integrity and vision and openness and the willingness to learn are all kind of important features of it. But leadership is a complex activity, and the kind of skills and capacity are dependent on the actual problem that you face. Different kind of problems call for a different kind of leadership. The other thing about leadership, it's not so much as the activity of a single individual. Many people can provide leadership. You can create a network of leadership. So you might be good at one thing, but others can compensate for your lack of talent or your blind spots to really provide the necessary leadership to help societies and communities and organizations address their toughest challenges.
I think this is like what exactly Professor William said, that we can create leaders. And in our country, where we need to develop more project, more industry, and also in the government side, to make the country develop further into strong democratic countries. I think most important is we need to increase the middle class number to something like 70% or so, so they become like other modern countries. And without having or without producing a lot of leaders, I think this is going to be tough to reach that objective. And in my own capacity, by building a lot of industrial estates, I found that the most difficult is to find a person in charge for every project. This is like when you have a car. Without a driver, the car cannot move on. So even if it's a small unit of a project, you still need a person in charge, a captain, a driver, and he is a leader. So if now we can work together with Prof. Williams to also influence other people, how important it is for Indonesia to produce leaders, to build the capacity, then I think it ensures that Indonesia can progress better in producing more middle class, because a lot of people can become leaders in their own sectors. So we need to have more and more great people like Professor William to teach us how to build our capacity in having more and more leaders. Well, the world language today is English. And I think if we want to improve the welfare of our people, we must be able to attract people from overseas, either they are investors, academics, or influence people to help us to create more jobs and better education. Now, if we don't embrace English as the medium of communication, then it is a drawback. At the moment, a lot of rich people send their children overseas. So this actually widens the gap between rich and poor, because the rich become richer because they can educate their children overseas. So they learn English better, they learn about advanced technology in countries like America, Australia, and so on. So President University is trying to establish, or we have actually established this 12 years ago, trying to build a great university on par with other great universities in the world, and so that the people who cannot afford to go overseas can also enjoy the same type of education. It's in English, and they have to have 1 year experience in our factories in our industrial estate in Chapapeka, and they have to live in the dorm so that they are exposed to international community and become independent. And also they have exposure to international level, because most of the employers, when they employ people, they always ask, have you had any experience? So they have 1 year experience if they studied in presidency. Do you speak English? Yes, they speak English. How about your skill of communication and independency? Since they live in the dorm, they have to be able to manage themselves and work with or live with other friends from different countries, because as our policy, 30% of our students comes from overseas. So this is the difference of presidency compared to other universities in Indonesia. It is an Indonesian university with Indonesian curriculum, but teaches in English and set up the standard like it is an international university, but it is not an international university, but we aim to have an international standard of university. So hopefully this kind of thing will be followed by many other universities in Indonesia, so we can produce more graduates who can work anywhere in the world, because they command English, they have 1 year experience in factories in our estate which come from 30 countries. So if they work in Samsung factory in Cikarang, they can go anywhere in the world where Samsung has got also factories. If they work for Unilever in Cikarang, they can go anywhere where Unilever has got factories all over the world. Perhaps not even the same company, but they are now have the skill, they have got an international standard of training and so on. So I'm very grateful and honored that Professor Williams has agreed to give his speech in our 9th graduation of presidency tomorrow.
I'm excited by the vision and the potential for its contribution to Indonesia. Other universities, I don't know, in the United States, for example, Australia included, we have these traditional universities. Many of them are a little slow to change. They're used to being kind of a box and people go and they attend. In the future, even the notion of universities will have to change to be more practitioner-oriented, really developing capacities, whether it's leadership capacities, technical capacities, managerial capacities, to deal with real-world problems. Now, that doesn't mean you do not study philosophy. Of course, philosophy and the liberal arts are important to develop critical thinking and to understand the nature of the challenges that humanity faces. But it must be combined with a very strong practical orientation to deal with real-world problems. So all universities are struggling with how to do that and how to do that well. But one of the biggest challenge is to create an interdisciplinary approach to the problems we face. Traditional universities have these silos, and so the government faculty is over here, the business faculty there, the philosophy faculty, the economics faculty, the arts faculty, and academics are very independent and somewhat stubborn in terms of their thinking and their capacity to interact across these boundaries. But universities need to be a place where the full array of ideas can come together and interact to create something bigger and better than any independent theory on its own. So you cannot just create an economic model of development unless you're attending to the social aspects of development. And so included with that must be the religious and spiritual dimensions of development and the cultural dimensions of development. So the nature of the problems that we face today, not only in the context of Indonesia, but as nations and in the relationship between nations and communities, interdependent challenges. And therefore you need models to deal with the nature of independence, and universities need to embody that in terms of practice and how they go about educating people. So the mission of President's University is wonderful, and the fact that it's experimenting with new ways of doing things and offering an alternative to the prevailing models is absolutely critical, because universities too need to be at the frontier, exploring, experimenting, trying new things to make the discoveries needed on how to educate people for the 21st century. Because you cannot have old 20th century models, or in some places in the world, 18th century models that they're using to try to create 21st century leaders. We're in a different era. The challenges are radically different from anything in the past. And to figure out how do we build these capacities to deal with these complex challenges, the university can be a wonderful place to do the critical and creative thinking for that work. And that's what I see going on at President's University. Well, I don't know enough about the characters involved, and far be it from me, an outsider, to comment on domestic politics or who I think would be the better leader. So just let me comment from the point of view of what I think any country needs today. This isn't a time for great men or women per se. You need strong professionals who can bring the technical prowess, but you also need people who have a relationship with all these divergent groups who can hold them together. A country like Indonesia, its strength is its diversity, and a potential, not a weakness, but a challenge is managing that diversity. So you need leadership that can bridge all these differences and bring together all these groups to coalesce around a common vision that's much greater than the independent interests of any one group. So you need people who have that capacity and to embody that capacity. So they must be forward-looking at the same time while respecting the extraordinary traditions and values that exist in the country in all cultures. And so you want to be able to harness the spirit and strength and values of diversity on behalf of creating something much bigger. So that's a lot to ask of any one individual. So you want somebody who can bring this great team around them to be able to do that work. But I also suggest in the context of Indonesia, while you've got your own independent leadership work that has to be done, given we're in the age of globalization and given the size of Indonesia, its potential to make an even greater contribution in the larger world is definitely there. So how do you exercise leadership out into the larger world, into international institutions, in generating awareness of what's going on here, so that you become an even greater participant in kind of international issues and challenges? So you want somebody not with a parochial mindset, but a very global mindset, because this is a period of transition. You've got a very stable country right now. It's different than it was 10 years ago, very different than it was 20 years ago, radically different from what it was 40 years ago. And so that stability becomes a foundation for much greater things, which makes it extremely exciting, but it can also be very disruptive to traditional ways of doing things, because you can go too fast and some people get frustrated and they don't know where you're going, so you've got to bring all these different groups along. So if you have somebody that has that kind of mindset, that can work with the business community, work with the religious community, work with the social sector, and really bring these groups together to create something that's exciting, that each group can see their aspirations in, while at the same time there's a bigger aspiration that holds everyone, then that's the kind of person that you need for leadership, I would suggest. Given how big this country is, the opportunities to make a contribution are everywhere. There's no shortage. Whether it's in business, whether it's at the grassroots in an NGO, whether you want to join government, whether you want to go into politics, every aspect here is in a state of flux, a state of change. And when leadership emerges, whether it's coming from a young person who's bringing their passion and their ideas, or an older person that's trying to bring their experience to help people navigate this complex terrain, when somebody's willing to step up, show a degree of courage, the spirit of idealism, the sense that things can be different, and an openness and a willingness to learn, great things can be done. So in universities, and particularly with young people, they bring that to university life. Sometimes as they get older, they become a little cynical, a little more skeptical, a little more jaded, and think, well, you can't change anything around here. So I encourage them to keep that spirit alive that is developed in the university. Don't let that flame weaken or go out or die in any way. So the opportunities are abundant to make a difference. Sometimes you struggle, sometimes you feel like, wow, I'm just down here, I've got to wait till I get all this power and status and position. It's not true. There's so many ways you can make the difference. And Indonesia is a young country, but it's also a very old country. You've got it all there, which suggests that you're not imprisoned by your past, but you've got this wonderful past as a resource, yet given how united you are, it generates such a fantastic future, a potential future. And we all know that the future is created by the spirit and vitality of young people. So they just should look out there and see abundant opportunity, and that's what the university provides. So go out and continue to be the change agents for Indonesia.
Thank you, Professor. Terima kasih.